Imagine, for a moment, the ultimate paradox. A military force so renowned for its discipline, unyielding loyalty, and absolute obedience, the very emblem of imperial power, suddenly turning its formidable might against itself. Welcome back to the History Atlas. What profound rot, what unimaginable betrayal could compel the Roman legions, the bedrock of the empire, to raise their standards not against a foreign enemy, but against the eagle they swore to uphold, against Rome itself? This is an exploration of the Roman legion's darkest secret, the recurring, devastating mutinies that fractured its famed iron discipline and shook the empire to its very foundations. While we instinctively picture the Roman soldier as a paragon of loyalty, an unshakable instrument of the Senate and people of Rome, this idealized image often belies a grim reality. Rome's global reach and internal stability were perpetually vulnerable to internal decay, to the resentments and frustrations simmering within its own ranks. From battle-hardened legionaries on distant frontiers to the elite Praetorian Guard at the heart of the capital, the threat of rebellion was a constant, terrifying shadow. The world's greatest military power, ostensibly invincible to its foes, frequently found itself on the precipice of collapse from within. Rome's legions, often depicted as an unstoppable force, a monolithic entity of unwavering loyalty and iron discipline, were indeed the envy of the ancient world. Their precision on the battlefield, intricate camp machinery, and relentless efficiency in conquest created an enduring image of military perfection. They were Rome's very sinews, stretching her dominion across continents. Yet, this glorious facade masked a grim reality. The iron discipline Rome famously wielded was not an immutable state, but a brittle construct, constantly forged anew under immense pressure and often on the verge of splintering. For the legionary, daily life was a stark contrast to triumphant arches and grand narratives. His existence was defined by relentless, grinding service, decades-long campaigns far from home in desolate, hostile lands. He endured brutal, sometimes arbitrary discipline, the omnipresent threat of death, not just from barbarian spears, but from disease, famine, and exposure. Garrisoned on distant frontiers, the Rhine, the Danube, the deserts of Syria, these men lived lives of profound isolation, their ties to Rome tenuous. Such conditions, while undeniably hardening soldiers, simultaneously sowed deep seeds of discontent. The psychological and physical toll, compounded by the constant specter of injustice, could erode the strongest loyalties. The celebrated loyalty was a fragile bond, constantly tested and too often shattered by systemic failings. For the Roman soldier, despair frequently stemmed not from the battlefield, but from grinding neglect, broken promises, and arbitrary cruelties inflicted by his own commanders. These were recurring grievances, a bitter catalogue of betrayal. At the core of many mutinies lay fundamental issues. Pay, known as stipendium, often arrived late or was withheld. Crucially, the promised discharge bonus, or premia, often land or a substantial sum, was frequently diminished or denied, leaving veterans impoverished after 20 or more years of brutal service. This betrayal of contract was a direct affront to a man's dignity and future. Discipline, while essential, routinely devolved into outright brutality. Flogging, the fustuarium, beating to death by comrades, and summary executions for infractions, real or perceived, fostered simmering resentment, not loyalty. Extended service was another crushing burden. Many soldiers served far beyond their promised 20 to 25 years, sometimes 30 or even 40, denied their earned repose. This was compounded by inadequate provisions and harsh living conditions. Failures in supply chains meant hunger, exposure, and disease were constant companions, even in static garrisons. Finally, incompetent or corrupt commanders who squandered lives through poor strategy or embezzled funds meant for their men created volatile atmospheres, fraying the very sinew of the legion. These systemic wounds chipped away at the iron will and unwavering loyalty Rome demanded, creating fertile ground for rebellion. The passing of Emperor Augustus in 14 AD cast a long shadow over Rome. The transition of power to Tiberius, an emperor lacking Augustus's charisma, created an immediate and dangerous vacuum. For legions stationed along distant, harsh frontiers, this moment of imperial uncertainty was the spark that ignited long-simmering resentments. Almost simultaneously, legions in Pannonia and on the Rhine, numbering tens of thousands, erupted in open mutiny. Camps, usually bastions of Roman discipline, became cauldrons of desperate anger. In Pannonia, 3 legions under Drusus, Tiberius's son, saw soldiers abandon posts, desecrate standards, and assault centurions. Their grievances, echoed across the Rhine, were familiar. Demands for higher pay, an end to extended service beyond 20 years, immediate discharge for veterans, and an alleviation of brutal conditions and arbitrary discipline. This was the collective howl of men pushed beyond endurance, their loyalty eclipsed by a profound sense of injustice. Spears were planted in the ground, their points aimed at any who might enforce the old order. Imperial representatives found themselves in a profoundly dangerous position. Germanicus, the celebrated general and adoptive son of Tiberius, faced 8 legions in Germany. His authority, even his life, hung by a thread as mutineers besieged his tent. He was forced to confront the soldiers directly, offering promises of pay increases from his own funds, even dramatically offering his own throat to a soldier's sword. Drusus in Pannonia, younger and less experienced, found himself isolated amidst boiling rage. He employed a precarious mix of stern threats, leveraging an opportune lunar eclipse as a divine omen and exploiting divisions among the mutineers. This was no simple insubordination. It was a profound psychological battle for the soul of the legions and the stability of the nascent principate. Tiberius's early reign teetered on the brink of collapse, threatened not by an external foe, but by Rome's very foundation. Quelling these mutinies required every tool in the imperial arsenal: negotiation, concessions, brutal execution of ringleaders, and meticulous restoration of order. Germanicus and Drusus, through daring and calculated brutality, suppressed these revolts, revealing the precarious balance between imperial authority and the deep-seated grievances of Rome's most vital asset. When legions' loyalty fractured, Rome responded with an iron fist, meting out punishments designed not merely to correct, but to terrify into absolute submission. The most infamous and psychologically devastating was decimation. This ancient military discipline, revived for extreme cases, involved the random selection and execution of 1 in 10 mutinous soldiers by their own comrades. Its purpose was clear: to re-establish a fear so profound that the very thought of insubordination would be extinguished, a calculated act of collective terror to dissolve solidarity and impress the lethal cost of defying Rome. Beyond decimation, consequences were broad and brutal. Collective executions of ringleaders were common, followed by mass demotions, public shaming, and the disbandment of entire units, their standards broken, their legacy erased. The intent was always to re-establish imperial authority with unassailable finality. Yet, an emperor's position in such crises was complex. Leaders like Tiberius, fresh from quelling the 14 AD mutinies, faced a delicate balance. He could not appear weak, inviting further rebellion, but he also could not annihilate the very armies upon which the empire's security depended. This was the emperor's dilemma: how to crush dissent ruthlessly enough to deter, yet pragmatically enough to retain a fighting force. Paradoxically, these acts of suppression sometimes forced Rome to adapt. While the immediate response was punitive, underlying grievances often necessitated reform. After the 14 AD mutinies, Tiberius, through his emissaries, made concessions, slight increases in pay, formalizing discharge bonuses, premia, and reaffirming service terms. These were often temporary or partial, granted reluctantly, but they illustrate that even draconian power understood the necessity of addressing root causes, however belatedly, to prevent future uprisings. The legions, in their desperation, had forced the hand of the empire, proving that even its formidable strength had limits. If frontier legions represented the fracturing of Rome's military spine, then the treachery of the Praetorian Guard was a cancerous growth at its very heart. These elite cohorts, the emperor's personal guardians and Rome's ultimate security apparatus, enjoyed superior pay, shorter service terms, and unparalleled proximity to the imperial throne. Yet, this privileged position, far from cementing loyalty, often bred avarice and a terrifying sense of entitlement. Unlike legionaries mutinying over withheld stipends, the Praetorians rebelled for power, influence, and sheer profit. Their mutinies were not distant skirmishes, but direct assaults on the imperial palace, a dagger thrust into the emperor's very throat. The guard, sworn to shield the sacred person of the princeps, often became his most immediate executioner, a chilling testament to the hypocrisy embedded within Rome's power structure. This elite force became the elite gone rogue, transforming from a guarantor of imperial stability into its greatest threat. History records their chilling involvement in assassinating emperors such as Caligula, cut down by conspirators, including his own guard. The short-lived Galba, summarily dispatched in the Forum, and Pertinax, murdered after mere 86 days when he sought to enforce discipline. More than regicides, the Praetorians developed a custom, most famously in 193 AD, of selling the throne to the highest bidder, a perverse auction of imperial power that spoke volumes about their corrupted ethos. They were kingmakers, assassins, and self-serving arbiters of imperial succession, wielding terrifying influence that made Rome's internal politics a deadly game of chance. The death of Nero in 68 AD ripped open the fabric of Roman imperial authority, plunging the empire into the chaos of 69 AD, the year of the four emperors. This power vacuum exposed the opportunism of the Praetorian Guard. Designed as the emperor's personal protectors, they became the ultimate arbiters of succession, their loyalty a commodity to be bought and sold. When the aged Galba arrived in Rome from Hispania, proclaimed emperor by his legions, the Praetorians offered dubious allegiance. His refusal to grant the customary donative, coupled with his austere nature, quickly eroded their support. The Guard, accustomed to lavish rewards, felt slighted. Their ambition, now untethered, saw opportunity not in defending Rome, but in seizing control. They assassinated Galba in the Forum itself, an act of unparalleled audacity, demonstrating contempt for legitimate succession. With Galba's blood still staining the paving stones, the Praetorians declared Otho, a former governor, as the new emperor. This was a choice of calculated self-interest, securing the promised donative Galba had withheld. The throne, in essence, was auctioned to the highest bidder, underscoring the Guard's deep cynicism. Otho's reign was fleeting, challenged by Vitellius's legions from Germania. As Vitellius's forces advanced, the Praetorians again shifted allegiances. They fought for Otho, then against him, and eventually against Vespasian, each time seeking favorable positioning within the new order. Their actions prolonged the civil war, costing countless Roman lives, not for an ideal, but for personal enrichment and continued power. This era laid bare the chilling truth. The trusted Guard had become Rome's greatest internal threat. We have explored the dark underbelly of Roman military might, witnessing how its vaunted legions, far from being monolithic instruments of imperial will, often fractured from within. Rome's true strength lay not solely in its capacity to conquer distant enemies, but profoundly in its ability to maintain the internal cohesion of its fighting forces and to address, however imperfectly, the grievances of its soldiers. These episodes of rebellion, from the dusty camps of Pannonia to the heart of the Eternal City, revealed an inherent fragility within the empire's foundation. The formidable iron discipline, celebrated throughout antiquity, proved to be an alloy, susceptible to cracks when the bonds of trust, fair treatment, and promised reward eroded. Rome, in its imperial wisdom, did attempt to learn from these traumatic eruptions, granting concessions like formalized discharge bonuses or adjusted service terms. Yet, these measures were often insufficient, reactive rather than preventative, demonstrating an ongoing struggle to reconcile the needs of the individual soldier with the vast, impersonal machinery of empire. The saga of Roman mutinies transcends mere military history. It offers a profound, timeless lesson on the dynamics of power and loyalty. It underscores that any powerful institution, whether a state, an army, or a corporation, is fundamentally predicated on the welfare, perceived fairness, and sustained morale of its constituents. When these bedrock principles are neglected, when the unspoken contract between leader and led is broken, even the most formidable structures begin to tremble. As Rome's internal wars so starkly illustrate, a nation's strength is ultimately provisional. It is only as robust as the loyalty, the commitment, and the legitimate satisfaction of the people who comprise it. The empire that could conquer the world found its most dangerous enemies not always beyond its borders, but within the hearts and minds of its own disillusioned soldiers. That enduring truth remains as relevant today as it was 2 millennia ago, a chilling echo from the shattered discipline of Rome. If you found this exploration compelling, consider subscribing to our channel for more journeys through history's epic pages.